the blade fell. For a heartbeat, perhaps two, Anne Boleyn's severed head may still have known the world, a grotesque coda to the life of the woman for whom Henry VIII had shattered the Church of England. How did the queen he once risked a kingdom to possess end up kneeling before a foreign sword? London, May 19th, 1536. The sun rose behind a vault of heavy grey cloud, leaking a pale metallic light over the Tower of London. The fortress loomed, stone and shadow, as much a monument to royal power as a tomb for its enemies. In the courtyard, carpenters had worked through the night. Not the usual high gallows, but a low, discreet platform, built for the elegance of a French executioner's blade. This was not routine justice. It was an event without precedent. For the first time in English history, a crowned queen would die by the sword. Her name, Anne Boleyn, had once been spoken like a spell. She had turned a king's heart into a weapon, made him defy a pope, defy an emperor, and defy his own people. She had not merely been his love, she was the spark of the English Reformation. But within the cold tower walls, that woman no longer existed in the eyes of the law. Anne Boleyn was now a traitor. In the small chamber where she had been confined for 17 days, Anne awoke to her last morning. She was 35 years old. The crown was gone, betrayal pressed in from all sides. Yet she still carried the grace that had once set a royal court alight. She rose with a strange, steady dignity. A handful of loyal ladies helped her prepare. Every layer of clothing was chosen with deliberate care. A dark gray cloak lined with fur, somber, respectful. Beneath it, a deep crimson bodice, not for vanity, but to mask the blood that would soon be spilled. It was costume as armor, her final statement of strength. There was no tremor in her voice when she spoke, only a razor's edge of wit. "I hear the executioner is very good," she murmured, touching the slender column of her neck. "See, I have a little neck." Those who heard it would never forget the chill, humor balanced on the brink of death. But how had it come to this? Anne's story did not begin with a crown. It began with ambition. She was the daughter of Thomas Boleyn, a shrewd diplomat on the rise, and Elizabeth Howard, born into one of England's oldest noble families. Her childhood was steeped in the fragrance of candle wax and parchment, the murmur of foreign tongues. Educated in the Netherlands, polished in the glittering French court of Queen Claude, she absorbed the manners, language, and daring thought of the Renaissance. When she returned to England around 1522, she did not fit Tudor ideals of beauty. Her skin was olive, her eyes dark as jet, not the pale, golden-haired fashion of the day. But she had something rarer: quick intelligence, effortless poise, a presence that drew the gaze without a word. Soon, she caught the eye of Henry VIII. The king was still bound in an unfruitful marriage to Catherine of Aragon. Years without a son had festered into frustration. When Henry sought Anne as a mistress, she refused him outright. Her sister Mary had already walked that path. Anne would not. "If you want my body," she is said to have told him, "you must give me a crown." The audacity was intoxicating. For 7 years, Henry pursued her. The chase became a political earthquake. Denied a papal annulment, Henry severed England from Rome, named himself supreme head of the church, and remade the kingdom's faith. In January 1533, they wed in secret. Anne was already pregnant, and both prayed for a son. Instead, in September, she bore a daughter, Elizabeth. The king's disappointment was sharp. But Anne was still crowned in a pageant of gold and scarlet. As queen, she was no ornament. She championed reform, pressed for the Bible in English, and surrounded herself with scholars. But her fire bred enemies. Noble houses resented her rise. Catholics blamed her for the schism with Rome. Even within her household, whispers coiled like smoke. Her first true blow came not from scandal, but from loss. After Elizabeth's birth, she miscarried in 1534. The weight of expectation, an heir, a son, tightened like a noose. By early 1536, Anne was pregnant again. But in January, disaster struck. She miscarried once more, this time a boy. Some whispered it happened after news reached her that Henry had been thrown from his horse in a joust and lay unconscious for hours. Whether from shock or grief, the loss was shattering. The court's warmth drained away. Where there had been rivalry, there was now open hostility. Henry's glances grew cool, his presence scarce. Into this void stepped Thomas Cromwell, the king's calculating minister. Once her ally in tearing England from Rome, he now measured her as an obstacle. By April, his strategy had sharpened to a blade. Rumors bloomed in corridors and council chambers. Adultery, incest, treason. The names of her alleged lovers dripped into the air like poison. 5 men in all, among them her own brother, George Boleyn. The evidence was brittle, the accusations fantastical, but truth had little standing in Tudor England. What mattered was the theater of guilt. On May 2nd, 1536, Anne was arrested. Taken to the Tower, she passed beneath the same traitor's gate through which so many had entered never to return. Her trial on May 15th was no trial at all, but a performance. She faced her judges without counsel, without the chance to confront her accusers. The jury was stacked with enemies and opportunists. Still, she met the charges with a composure that unsettled them. An observer said she spoke not as a woman, but as something angelic. She pointed to holes in the case, to the absurdity of the timelines, but the verdict had been written before the trial began. Guilty. At first, the sentence was death by burning, a spectacle of agony. Henry altered it to beheading, summoning from Calais a swordsman famed for swift, clean strikes. Some called it mercy, others called it theater. The date was set, May 19th. Anne spent the dawn of that day in prayer, expecting the end at 8 in the morning. She received the sacrament, whispered her innocence to God, and readied herself. But the hour passed. The execution was delayed until noon. The wait was its own cruelty. Alone, she murmured over and over, "Lord, have mercy on me." She swore on the host that she had never betrayed the king. "For my salvation," she said, "I am innocent of the things for which I was condemned." When the summons came at last, she gave her ladies parting gifts, tokens made priceless by the moment. A prayer book, a piece of jewelry, a handkerchief. "Remember me and how I end," she told them, not as plea for pity, but as a final assertion of self. The courtyard held perhaps 1,000 witnesses, fewer than expected. The crowd was hushed, their hats removed as she passed. She wore gray and crimson, her steps measured, her head high. On the scaffold, the cold air clung like damp cloth. The sky was still iron gray. She folded her hands, eyes clear, and began to speak. "Good Christian people," she said evenly, "I am come hither to die according to the law, and by the law I am judged to die. I pray God save the king and send him long to reign over you. For never prince had a more gentle nor more loving subject than I have been." She confessed nothing, blamed no one. Even to the man who had betrayed her, she gave forgiveness. Then she knelt upon the straw. She removed her headdress. One of her ladies stepped forward, tying a blindfold over her eyes. Anne adjusted it herself with a small, deliberate motion, then clasped her hands once more. Her back was straight, her neck bared, the line of it long and calm. The French executioner, dressed in black, stood beside her. In his hands, a sword, sharper and swifter than the English axe. He moved without flourish, without fanfare. No drum roll, only a quiet murmur to his assistant, "My sword," meant to draw her attention for the final instant. Anne turned her head a fraction. The blade flashed once. No cry, no struggle, only silence. Anne Boleyn, Queen of England, mother of a child who would one day transform the realm, was gone. For a breath, the crowd stood frozen. Some wept, others crossed themselves. Even those who had wished her downfall seemed unsettled by the weight of the moment. Her body was placed in a simple arrow chest, the kind meant for storing weapons. No coffin, no pomp. She was buried within the tower's chapel, under the cold stone she had once walked as queen. But her end was not her erasure. Her daughter Elizabeth would grow to reign for 45 years, an age of stability, expansion, and cultural brilliance unmatched in English history. The woman condemned as a traitor had given birth to one of England's greatest monarchs. Anne had lost her life, but not her purpose. She had risen in a world built to keep women silent and dared to speak. She had reached for power, not only for love but for belief, and though she paid the price in blood, she had altered the course of a kingdom. Nearly 5 centuries later, her name still moves between lips, half in awe, half in sorrow, not merely as a tragic beauty, but as a figure of defiance. She knelt to the sword, but she stands unbroken in history. Anne Boleyn, queen, mother, rebel, martyr. A life ended in shadow, yet casting a light that refuses to fade.